The wife gave herself as a gift to the boss. The boss gently took away her first night. Hi, my beautiful story family. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. I hope you're all doing well today. Before we dive into today's story, I want to take a moment to say a little prayer for you. Dear Heavenly Father, I come to you today to lift up my dearest reader who is so precious to me. Please bless them and surround them with your loving arms as they navigate through life's ups and downs. Now I want to share something personal with you. I've been feeling a little upset lately because many of you have told me you enjoy watching my stories, but you don't take a moment to comment. It's been 16 years of hard work and dedication to create these stories for you, and I would love to hear from you in return. Even just a few words in the comments, whether you like the story or have suggestions, would mean the world to me. You are my family, and that's why I'm asking for your feedback. If there's anything I'm not doing right, or anything I can improve, please let me know. I apologize if my words come across as too emotional. I'm just speaking from the heart. I truly value each and every one of you. All right, with that said, let's start today's story. The morning sunlight streamed through the towering glass windows of Langston Enterprises, casting prismatic patterns across the polished marble floors of the lobby. Bisa Alheri's heart thundered in her chest as she clutched her portfolio closer, her reflection in the mirrored walls, showing a young woman on the cusp of changing her destiny. The prestigious architecture firm occupied the top 10 floors of Manhattan's most innovative skyscraper, a building that seemed to touch the clouds themselves, much like her dreams. At 27, Bisa had already overcome more obstacles than most face in a lifetime. Born in a small village in Nigeria, she had grown up watching her mother sacrifice everything to ensure her daughter could pursue an education. The memory of her mother's weathered hands, worn from years of selling hand-woven textiles in the local market, had driven Bisa through countless sleepless nights at architecture school. Now, standing in the epicenter of global architecture, she felt the weight of those sacrifices on her shoulders. The elevator ride to the top floor seemed endless. Each soft chime marking another floor past made Bisa's pulse quicken. Her portfolio contained designs that challenged conventional architecture, spaces that merged modern sustainability with the communal wisdom of her African heritage. These weren't just buildings she was proposing, they were bridges between cultures, between past and future. When the elevator doors finally opened onto the 50th floor, Bisa stepped into a world of understated luxury. The reception area featured sweeping curves and natural materials, a perfect harmony of power and organic beauty. The receptionist, a perfectly coiffed woman named Patricia, greeted her with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ms. Alheri, Mr. Langston will see you now." The walk to the CEO's office felt like crossing an ocean. Whispers followed in her wake, curious eyes taking in her appearance, her carefully chosen charcoal grey suit, accented with a silk scarf that featured traditional Nigerian patterns. Some gazes held curiosity, others skepticism. Bisa lifted her chin higher, her mother's words echoing in her mind, "Walk like you carry the sun in your heart." The massive double doors to Huck Langston's office opened silently, revealing a space that took Bisa's breath away. 3 walls of floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan that made the city look like an architect's dream made real. But it was the man standing at those windows that caused her heart to skip a beat. Huck Langston turned, and time seemed to slow. At 35, he cut an impressive figure. Tall and athletic, his custom-made suit highlighting broad shoulders that suggested he was no stranger to physical work despite his current position. His dark hair had a slight wave to it, and a few strands fell across his forehead in a way that made him seem more approachable than his reputation suggested. But it was his eyes that captured Bisa's attention, steel grey with flecks of blue, like the sky before a storm, and filled with an intelligence that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained composure. "Miss Alheri." His voice was deep and rich, with a warmth that surprised her. "Welcome to Langston Enterprises." As he stepped forward to shake her hand, a current of awareness passed between them. His hand was warm, his grip firm, but not overwhelming, and he held the handshake a moment longer than strictly necessary. Bisa felt the contact like a spark of electricity that travelled up her arm and settled somewhere near her heart. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Langston," she managed, proud that her voice remained steady, despite the flutter in her stomach. "Please, have a seat." He gestured to a sleek conference table rather than the more formal desk arrangement. "I've been looking forward to this presentation since I saw your initial concepts." Bisa blinked in surprise. It was unusual for a CEO to review preliminary submissions personally. As she set up her presentation, she could feel his presence behind her, not hovering but aware. The scent of his cologne, something woodsy and elegant, teased her senses. "Your approach to the community center project is unlike anything I've seen," he commented, taking a seat close enough that she could see the subtle pattern in his silk tie. "Tell me what inspired it." For the next hour, Bisa found herself swept up in a conversation that felt more like a dance. Huck didn't just listen, he engaged, challenged, and built upon her ideas. His questions revealed a deep understanding of architecture that went beyond business. He had a genuine passion for the way buildings could shape communities and change lives. The central courtyard design, he leaned forward, pointing to one of her renderings. "It reminds me of traditional African meeting spaces." "Yes," Bisa's eyes lit up. "In my village, we had a similar space. It was the heart of the community, where stories were shared, celebrations were held, conflicts were resolved. I wanted to bring that sense of community to modern urban architecture." "It's brilliant," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're not just designing buildings, Ms. Alheri. You're designing connections." The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. "Please," she found herself saying, "call me Bisa." A smile curved his lips, transforming his handsome face into something almost dangerous in its appeal. "Bisa," he repeated as if tasting the word. "It suits you. Does it have a meaning?" "It means it shall come to pass in Hausa," she explained, watching as understanding deepened his smile. "A name that speaks of destiny," he mused. "Tell me, Bisa, what destiny do you see for yourself here at Langston Enterprises?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibilities that went beyond professional ambitions. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. The spell broke as he checked it, his expression shifting back to professional courtesy. "I apologize, but I have another meeting," he stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a fluid motion. "But I'm not finished with this discussion. Would you be available for dinner this evening to continue our conversation about the project?" Bisa's heart leapt, even as her mind raced through all the reasons she should decline: office rumors, professional boundaries, the vast differences in their backgrounds and positions. But looking up into those storm-grey eyes, she found herself nodding. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant send you the details." He walked her to the door, then paused. "And Bisa, thank you for reminding me why I fell in love with architecture in the first place." As she left his office, Bisa could feel the eyes of the entire floor following her, but this time she barely noticed. Her mind was filled with storm-grey eyes and the promise of dinner. Something had shifted in that office, something that felt like destiny itself unfolding. Later that afternoon, as she sat at her temporary desk in the junior designers area, an email arrived with details for dinner at an exclusive rooftop restaurant. Attached was a personal note from Huck. Looking forward to continuing our discussion about building bridges between worlds. H. Bisa touched the words on her screen, a smile playing at her lips. She thought of her mother's words about carrying the sun in her heart, and for the first time, she truly understood what that meant. Because right now, she felt as though she could light up the entire Manhattan skyline with the glow of possibility burning in her chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. As the sun began its descent behind the city's towers, casting long shadows and painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Bisa stood before the mirror in the office bathroom, adjusting her scarf and touching up her lipstick. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, not by makeup or clothing, but by the light of possibility shining in her eyes. She thought of the long journey that had brought her here, from a small village in Nigeria to the heights of Manhattan's architectural world. Of her mother's sacrifices, her own relentless dedication, and now this moment that felt like stepping off the edge of everything she knew into something new and thrilling. A text message arrived on her phone. Car waiting downstairs. H. Bisa gathered her courage along with her belongings. Whatever happened next, she knew this day would mark the beginning of something extraordinary. As she walked toward the elevator, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor, she smiled. After all, her name meant, "shall come to pass." And standing in this moment, on the threshold of something that felt like destiny, she believed it with all her heart. The evening spread out before her like a blank canvas, ready for the first strokes of what promised to be a masterpiece of their own design. And somewhere in the gathering dusk of Manhattan, Huck Langston was waiting to help her paint it. Chapter 2. Whispers and Glances. The rooftop restaurant sparkled like a crown of jewels atop one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings. Bisa stepped out of the private elevator, her breath catching at the sight before her. The entire space was enclosed in glass that seemed to disappear into the night sky, creating the illusion of dining among the stars themselves. Twinkling lights draped from invisible wires overhead, mimicking constellations, while the city lights below created their own earthbound galaxy. Huck was already waiting, his tall figure silhouetted against the cityscape. He had removed his suit jacket, and his crisp white shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. The more casual look somehow made him even more devastating. When he turned and saw her, his smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger, more approachable. "You look beautiful," he said softly as she approached, his eyes taking in her outfit. She had changed into a deep purple dress that combined modern styling with subtle African-inspired patterns along the neckline. "The restaurant's usually crowded, but I thought we might appreciate some privacy for our discussion." He gestured to the empty space around them. "You reserved the entire restaurant?" Bisa asked, amazed at the gesture. "Just for tonight," he smiled, pulling out her chair. "I wanted to hear more about your vision without interruption." As they settled in, a sommelier appeared silently with a bottle of wine. Huck waited for Bisa's approval before nodding to pour. The rich red liquid caught the light like liquid garnets as it flowed into their glasses. "To building bridges," Huck proposed, raising his glass. "To new possibilities," Bisa countered, meeting his eyes over the rim of her glass. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine, moving effortlessly between architecture and personal history. Huck spoke of growing up in his father's shadow, of summer days spent on construction sites, learning the business from the ground up. "My father believed in understanding every aspect of what we do," he explained, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "From laying foundations to securing permits, but he never quite understood my passion for the artistry of architecture. And yet here you are, running one of the most innovative firms in the world, Bisa observed. Here I am, he agreed, his eyes holding hers, finding myself increasingly grateful for the twists of fate that bring the right people into our lives at exactly the right moment. The air between them seemed to charge with electricity. Before Bisa could respond, their first course arrived, a work of art in itself that their chef explained in detail. Throughout the meal, each dish told a story, combining flavors that spoke of both innovation and tradition. "Tell me about your mother," Huck requested, as they lingered over dessert. "You mentioned her sacrifices earlier." Bisa's eyes softened with memory. "Everything I am, I owe to her strength. She raised me alone after my father died, selling traditional textiles to put me through school. When I told her I wanted to study architecture, she sold her most precious belongings to help fund my education. She must be very proud of you now." "She is," Bisa smiled, "though she worries. She always says success is like climbing a tall tree. The higher you go, the more the wind tries to shake you down." "Wise words," Huck mused, "and yet sometimes the view from the top is worth the climb." As the evening progressed, they found themselves standing at the rooftop's edge, looking out over the city they both loved. The night air carried a hint of autumn crispness, and Huck noticed Bisa's slight shiver. Without a word, he removed his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of his body still lingered in the fabric, along with the subtle scent of his cologne. "Thank you," she murmured, pulling the jacket closer. Its size emphasized her petite frame, making something protective stir in Huck's chest. "You know," he said, leaning against the railing, "I've been in this business long enough to recognize something extraordinary when I see it. Your designs, Bisa. They're not just buildings, they're poetry in steel and glass. Poetry that needs to be practical," she reminded him. "Beautiful buildings mean nothing if they don't serve their communities." "Exactly," his eyes lit up. "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell our board for years. We have a responsibility to build more than just profitable spaces. We need to build communities, connections, futures." Their shared passion sparked between them, making the air feel electric with possibility. Huck turned to face her fully, one hand still resting on the railing beside her. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position," he said softly. "Not just as a junior designer. I want you to head up our new community development division, complete creative control, your own team, direct access to resources." Bisa's heart raced at the opportunity, but caution made her pause. "Why me? There must be dozens of more experienced architects in your firm." "Experience isn't everything." Huck stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. "Sometimes what we need is a fresh perspective, someone who sees possibilities others miss, someone who understands that architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about people." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. They were standing very close now, the city lights creating a private world around them. For a moment, Bisa thought he might kiss her, and her heart thundered at the possibility. Instead, he stepped back slightly, professional courtesy reasserting itself. "Think about it," he said gently. "Take the weekend to consider the offer. We can discuss details on Monday." The ride back down to street level was filled with a charged silence. Huck's private car was waiting to take her home, but before she could step in, he caught her hand. "Bisa!" His voice was rough with emotion. "Whatever you decide about the position, know that these past few hours have been extraordinary." She squeezed his hand once before letting go. "Good night, Huck." As the car pulled away from the curb, Bisa leaned back against the leather seat, still wrapped in Huck's jacket. Her mind spun with the events of the evening, the opportunities presented, and the undeniable attraction that sparked between them. The following weeks brought a delicate dance of professional collaboration and growing personal connection. Bisa accepted the position, throwing herself into the work with passion, but it was the quiet moments that tested her composure. Huck's hand brushing hers as they reviewed blueprints, the way his voice softened when they worked late into the evening, the electricity that filled the air when they found themselves alone in the elevator. Office rumors began to circulate, growing like ivy along the walls of their professional facade. Victoria Thorne, the head of HR, watched their interactions with increasingly narrow eyes. Her own intentions toward Huck were well known throughout the office, though he had never shown interest in her advances. "He's different with her," whispered the office assistants when they thought no one was listening. "Have you seen how he smiles when she presents at meetings?" But it was more than just smiles. It was the way Huck began taking the long route to his office, passing by Bisa's new corner workspace. It was the coffee that appeared on her desk on particularly stressful mornings, always prepared exactly as she liked it. It was the late-night design sessions that turned into deep conversations about their dreams for the future of architecture. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the Manhattan sky, they found themselves alone in the office. Bisa was putting the finishing touches on a presentation, while Huck allegedly had paperwork to complete. The storm had driven everyone else home early, leaving them in a world of their own. Lightning flashed, illuminating Bisa's workspace in stark white light. She jumped slightly at the subsequent thunder, and Huck materialized beside her desk. "Still here?" he asked softly, though he had been acutely aware of her presence all evening. "Almost finished." She gestured to her computer screen, where 3D renderings of their latest project rotated slowly. "I want everything to be perfect for tomorrow's board presentation." "It already is perfect." He moved closer, studying the design, like its creator. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Bisa turned in her chair to face him, finding him much closer than she expected. The dim office lighting softened his features, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "Huck," she began, but he gently placed a finger against her lips. "I know," he said. "I know all the reasons why this is complicated. The office politics, the professional boundaries, the potential scandal. But Bisa," his hand moved to cup her cheek, "some things are worth the risk." The storm chose that moment to knock out the power, plunging the office into darkness, broken only by occasional flashes of lightning. In that ethereal light, they found themselves drawing closer, the magnetism between them finally overwhelming their carefully maintained distance. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, like architects testing the strength of a new foundation. But it quickly deepened into something more passionate, years of denied attraction pouring out in a moment of complete surrender. Bisa's hands found their way to Huck's shoulders, while his fingers tangled in her hair, cradling her head as though she were something infinitely precious. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, the lights flickered back on. Reality reasserted itself, but something fundamental had shifted between them. There would be no going back to mere professional courtesy after this. "Have dinner with me again," Huck whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "Not as my employee, not as a colleague, just as yourself." "Yes," Bisa answered simply, her heart too full for more elaborate responses. As they gathered their things to leave, the storm having gentled to a soft rain, both knew they were stepping onto a path that would change everything. The whispers would grow louder, the glances more pointed, but in that moment nothing mattered except the joy of finally acknowledging what had been growing between them since that first meeting. In the lobby, before they parted ways, Huck pulled Bisa into one more brief kiss. "Whatever comes," he promised, "we'll face it together." Bisa smiled, touching his cheek gently. "Like all good architecture," she said, "we'll build it one day at a time." The night wrapped around them like a blanket as they went their separate ways, each carrying the warmth of new love in their hearts. Above them, the storm cleared, revealing stars that twinkled like promises of adventures yet to come. Their story was just beginning, and like the buildings they created together, it would be built on a foundation of shared dreams, mutual respect, and a love that defied all conventional blueprints. Chapter 3. Beyond the office walls. The autumn air carried the scent of possibility as Huck led Bisa through the hidden entrance of a rooftop garden in Manhattan's artistic district. Fairy lights twinkled overhead like earthbound stars, and the perfume of night-blooming jasmine filled the air. "This was my first solo project," he admitted, watching her face as she took in the carefully planned landscape. "Before I took over the company, before the pressure of being Thomas Langston's son became overwhelming, I designed this space as a reminder of why I fell in love with architecture. The garden was a masterpiece of urban design. Flowing water features created peaceful music, while carefully selected plants provided natural privacy screens. Strategic lighting made the space feel both intimate and expansive. "It's beautiful," Bisa breathed, trailing her fingers through a cascade of flowering vines. "So different from your corporate projects." "Because this was purely from my heart." Huck moved closer, drawn to her as always. "Like how I feel about you." Their kiss was tender yet passionate, the city lights creating a private universe around them. When they finally parted, Bisa saw something vulnerable in Huck's eyes. "I come here when I need to remember who I really am," he confessed. "Not the CEO, not the heir to Langston Enterprises, just me. You're the first person I've ever brought here." The admission touched Bisa deeply. She understood the weight of expectations he carried, just as she carried her own. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "For letting me see the real you." They spent hours in the garden, sharing dreams and fears they'd never voiced to anyone else. Bisa spoke of her childhood in Nigeria, of watching her mother sacrifice everything for her education. Huck revealed his complex relationship with his father's legacy, the desire to honor it while creating his own path. "Sometimes I wonder," he admitted, as they sat together on a carved stone bench, "if I'll ever be more than just Thomas Langston's son in people's eyes." "You already are," Bisa turned to face him. "You're the man who sees beyond profit margins to the human impact of architecture, the man who wants to build communities, not just buildings, the man I'm falling in love with." The words hung in the air between them, precious and new. Huck's heart soared as he pulled her close. "I'm falling in love with you too," he whispered against her lips. "More every day." Their relationship deepened in the weeks that followed, though they maintained professional discretion at the office. But love has a way of showing itself in subtle details, the softening of Huck's voice when addressing Bisa in meetings, the electricity when their hands brushed while reviewing blueprints, the lingering glances that spoke volumes. Victoria Thorne watched it all with calculating eyes. During a board meeting where Bisa presented her innovative community development project, Victoria's questions carried veiled barbs. "These designs are interesting," she said, her smile sharp as glass, "though perhaps a bit ambitious for someone so new to our level of architecture." Before Huck could intervene, Bisa responded with quiet confidence. "Innovation often comes from fresh perspectives, Ms. Thorne. My experience working with underserved communities provides insights that can't be learned in corporate boardrooms." Her poise impressed the board members, but Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. Later, Huck found Bisa in her office, still radiating quiet strength. "You were amazing in there," he said, closing the door. "Though Victoria's reaction worries me." "I won't let anyone diminish what I've worked for," Bisa replied, her determination clear. "Not even for you." For me? Huck moved closer, confused. Yes, for you. I know having a relationship with an employee, especially one like me, could complicate things for you. If you need to step back. Huck silenced her with a kiss, pouring all his feelings into it. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. Never doubt what you mean to me, he said fiercely. You're not just an employee. You're not just someone I'm falling for. You're the person who makes me want to be better, to build something meaningful with my life. That weekend, Huck took Bisa to meet Howard Jameson, his father's closest friend and his own mentor. Over dinner in Howard's elegant townhouse, the older man watched them interact with knowing eyes. You remind me of Thomas and Catherine, he told them, referring to Huck's parents. They had that same spark, that same way of completing each other's thoughts. Though I must say, young lady, you challenge our Huck in ways Catherine never challenged Thomas. Is that a good thing? Bisa asked, feeling Huck's hand tighten around hers. Howard's smile was warm. It's exactly what he needs, what this company needs. Fresh vision, unfettered by old ways of thinking. He raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, and love brave enough to break boundaries. Later that night, in the privacy of Huck's penthouse, they slow danced on his balcony under the stars. The city stretched out below them, a canvas waiting for their shared vision. Howard was right, Huck murmured against Bisa's hair. You do challenge me. You make me want to create something revolutionary. We'll do it together, she promised, lifting her face for a kiss. Something beautiful, meaningful, lasting. As their lips met, both knew they were building something far more significant than mere architecture. Their love was designing a future neither had imagined possible, breaking down barriers and creating new possibilities with every shared moment. The night wrapped around them like a blessing, while the city lights twinkled below like witnesses to their growing love. In each other's arms, they found the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing their foundation was built on something stronger than corporate power or social expectations. It was built on love that dared to dream beyond boundaries. Chapter 4. Rising Tides. The London Architecture Symposium was held in a stunning Victorian-era building, its grand halls filled with the world's most innovative minds in design and construction. Bisa stood at the podium, her voice clear and confident as she presented their vision for sustainable community development. Huck watched from the front row, his heart swelling with pride as she commanded the attention of the entire room. Architecture isn't just about creating buildings, Bisa concluded, her passion evident in every word. It's about building bridges between communities, between past and future, between dreams and reality. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. Architects and developers from around the world crowded around her afterward, eager to discuss her ideas. Huck stayed back, letting her shine in her moment, though his eyes never left her. She was radiant, her innovative designs and natural charisma winning over even the most traditional members of the architectural community. Later that evening, they celebrated in their hotel suite overlooking the Thames. Huck had arranged for champagne and a private dinner on their balcony. You were amazing today, he said, pulling her close for a kiss. Did you see Richardson's face when you explained the solar integration system? I thought his eyebrows would disappear into his hairline. Bisa laughed, feeling light with success and happiness. I think we've started something important here, Huck. The response was beyond anything I expected. You've started something important, he corrected gently. This is your vision, Bisa. I'm just fortunate enough to help make it reality. They stayed up late into the night, planning and dreaming together. The city lights reflected off the river below, creating a magical atmosphere that made anything seem possible. However, their phones kept buzzing with messages from New York, Victoria Thorne was apparently making waves in their absence. She's called an emergency board meeting. Huck frowned, reading his emails. Something about concerns regarding company direction and professional conduct. Bisa's happiness dimmed slightly. She's not going to stop, is she? No, Huck pulled her closer. But neither are we. I've worked too hard to let someone like Victoria derail everything we're building. Their return to New York was met with immediate challenges. Victoria had spent their absence building a coalition of board members who questioned both the company's new direction and Bisa's rapid rise to prominence. The tension came to a head during a crucial client presentation. Bisa was showcasing designs for a revolutionary mixed-income housing development when Victoria interrupted with a devastating accusation. "I believe the board should be aware," she announced smoothly, "that these designs bear a striking resemblance to proposals submitted to our competitors 6 months ago. Ms. Alheri had access to these files during her initial interview process." The room fell silent. Bisa felt the blood drain from her face as all eyes turned to her. The implication was clear. She was being accused of design theft. "That's impossible," she said firmly, though her heart was racing. "These designs are original, developed from concepts I've been working on since graduate school. Do you have proof of that?" Victoria's smile was shark-like. "Documentation of your development process? Or should we just take your word for it?" Huck stood, his face thunderous. "Victoria, these accusations are completely out of line. The board has already approved these designs." "The board approved them based on false pretenses," Victoria countered. "If Ms. Alheri has nothing to hide, she should welcome an investigation." The next few days were a nightmare of scrutiny and whispers. Though Bisa knew her designs were original, Victoria had planted seeds of doubt that grew like weeds through the company. Even worse was watching Huck struggle between his role as CEO and his personal feelings. "We have to handle this professionally," he said one evening in his office, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "If I defend you too strongly, it'll only fuel their suspicions." "I understand," Bisa said quietly, though her heart was breaking. "You have a responsibility to the company." "Bisa." He moved to take her hands, but she stepped back. Maybe we should take a break," she suggested, the words tasting like ashes in her mouth. "Just until this is resolved. Give the investigation no ammunition." "No," Huck's voice was fierce. "I won't let them force us apart. We've done nothing wrong." But the pressure continued to mount. Victoria's investigation expanded, questioning every project Bisa had touched, every promotion she'd received. The whispers in the office grew louder, and former allies began to distance themselves. The final blow came when Victoria presented her evidence, screenshots of similar designs from a competitor's database, time-stamped months before Bisa's presentation. The images were manipulated, the dates altered, but the damage was done. Huck, trapped between his role as CEO and his heart, was forced to maintain objectivity. "We have to investigate these claims thoroughly," he announced in a board meeting, unable to meet Bisa's eyes. "It's a matter of company integrity." Bisa felt her world crumbling. The man she loved, who had promised to stand by her side, was now questioning her integrity. The pain was unbearable. That evening, she packed her desk while the office was empty, leaving only a simple note on Huck's desk. "You once said some things were worth the risk. I guess we were wrong." She submitted her resignation via email, unable to face another day of suspicious glances and whispered accusations. As she left Langston Enterprises for the last time, the city lights that had once seemed so full of promise now felt cold and distant. Back in her apartment, Bisa finally let the tears fall. She looked at the designs spread across her desk, her original sketches, the developments, the dreams she'd poured into every line. How had something so beautiful turned so ugly? Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from Huck, but she couldn't bring herself to read them. Each one felt like another crack in her already broken heart. Instead, she called her mother, drawing strength from the wisdom that had guided her all her life. "When the wind blows hard," her mother said softly, "even the strongest trees must bend. But bending is not breaking, my daughter. You will stand tall again." Days passed in a blur of pain and determination. Bisa threw herself into proving her innocence, gathering every sketch, every note, every iteration of her designs from her years of work. She reached out to her professors, her mentors, anyone who could verify the originality of her concepts. Meanwhile, Huck was conducting his own investigation, driven by equal parts duty and desperate love. He couldn't believe the woman he knew, whose passion for ethical architecture had inspired him, could be guilty of design theft. But as CEO, he had to maintain the appearance of objectivity. The truth finally emerged through an unexpected source. A junior IT technician, troubled by conscience, came forward with evidence that Victoria had accessed and altered the competitor's database. The timestamps had been manipulated, the similarities manufactured to discredit Bisa. Huck's rage when he discovered the truth was terrifying to behold. Victoria was terminated immediately, but the damage to his relationship with Bisa felt irreparable. He had doubted her, had put his role as CEO before his faith in her integrity. Standing in her empty office, holding her resignation letter, Huck felt the full weight of his failure. He had promised to stand by her, to face everything together, and at the first real test, he had faltered. The city lights flickered outside his office window, reminding him of all the nights they had spent dreaming together. He couldn't let it end this way. He wouldn't. Rain was falling when he arrived at her apartment, soaking him to the skin as he knocked on her door. For a long moment there was only silence, and he feared she wouldn't answer. Then the door opened, and there she was, her eyes red from crying but still beautiful, still the woman he loved more than his own life. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate, but all he had. "I failed you. I let fear and duty cloud my judgment when I should have trusted my heart. You deserve better." Bisa stood in the doorway, her heart warring between love and hurt. "You doubted me," she said softly. "After everything we shared, you doubted me." "I doubted myself," he corrected, taking a step closer. "I doubted my right to choose love over duty. I was wrong, Bisa, so wrong. Please, please give me a chance to make it right." The rain continued to fall, but neither of them noticed. They stood on the threshold of forgiveness, both knowing that what came next would define their future. "How?" Bisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How can we go back?" "We don't go back." Huck reached for her hand, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. "We go forward, together, the way we should have from the start. I love you, Bisa. Nothing else matters." The city hummed around them, a backdrop to their moment of truth. Sometimes love requires not just passion, but the courage to rebuild, to trust again, to choose each other despite the risks. As Bisa looked into Huck's eyes, she saw that courage, that unwavering love that had brought him to her door in the rain. The path to forgiveness would not be easy, but then nothing worth building ever was. And they were architects after all. They knew better than most that the strongest structures are often built on the foundations of what came before, stronger for having weathered the storm. Chapter 5. Storm Clouds. The rain continued to fall as Bisa stepped aside, silently inviting Huck into her apartment. The space was different from when he'd last seen it. Boxes were half-packed, designs and drawings scattered across every surface like fallen leaves. Evidence of a life being dismantled. "You were going to leave the city," he said softly, his heart clenching at the realization. "I was," Bisa admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. "My mother offered to help me set up a small practice back home. After everything, it seemed easier to start fresh." Huck moved closer, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms. And now? She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and lingering hurt. Now I don't know. You hurt me, Huck, not just professionally, but here. She placed a hand over her heart. I know. His voice was rough with emotion. When Victoria made those accusations, I should have trusted my heart, trusted what I knew about you. Instead, I let my position as CEO dictate my actions. I forgot that being a leader sometimes means standing up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by distant thunder. Bisa moved to the window, watching the storm rage over Manhattan. Do you know what hurt the most? She asked quietly. It wasn't the accusations or the investigation. It was watching you pull away, seeing doubt in your eyes when you looked at me. Huck's reflection appeared behind her in the window. I never doubted you, he said. I doubted myself, my judgment. I've spent so long trying to prove I deserve my position, trying to show I'm more than just my father's son, that I forgot what really matters. And what's that? Bisa turned to face him. You, he said simply. Us. This connection that's been growing since the moment you walked into my office. I've been so focused on being the perfect CEO that I forgot how to be the man who fell in love with you. The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Bisa's heart. The man I fell in love with wouldn't have let fear of criticism stop him from defending what he believed in. You're right, Huck took a step closer, which is why I'm here now, in the rain, asking for another chance. Not because it's the proper thing to do, but because my heart won't let me do anything else. Lightning flashed again, highlighting the determination in his face. Bisa felt her resolve wavering. What about the board? The company? I called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, he said. I'm going to lay out everything. Victoria's manipulation, my handling of the situation, and most importantly, my relationship with you. No more hiding, no more trying to maintain appearances. If they can't accept that, then maybe it's time for Langston Enterprises to have new leadership. Bisa's eyes widened. You'd risk everything? For you? Yes. He closed the distance between them, gently taking her hands in his. These past few days without you have been hell. I can live without the company, without the position, but I can't live without you in my life. Tears filled Bisa's eyes. I never wanted you to have to choose. You didn't make me choose, he smiled softly. You made me see what I should have known all along, that true leadership isn't about maintaining the status quo, it's about standing up for what's right. He reached up to cup her face, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. I love you, Bisa Alheri. I love your brilliant mind, your compassionate heart, your unwavering integrity. I love how you see the world not just as it is, but as it could be. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making up for doubting that love, even for a moment. The storm outside seemed to hold its breath as Bisa looked into his eyes, seeing the truth and love shining there. I love you too, she whispered. Even when it hurt, even when I tried to stop, I never stopped loving you. Their kiss was like coming home after a long journey, familiar yet somehow new. Huck pulled her close, pouring all his love and regret and hope into the embrace. Bisa melted against him, her heart finally beginning to heal. When they parted, Huck rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he murmured. Stay and fight this battle with me, together, the way we should have been from the start. Together, Bisa agreed, a small smile playing at her lips, but on one condition. Anything. No more hiding, no more worrying about appearances or office politics. If we're going to do this, we do it openly, honestly. Deal. Huck sealed the promise with another kiss. In fact, I have an idea about that. He pulled back slightly, his eyes sparkling with excitement. The community center project, the one Victoria tried to discredit. What if we made it our flagship development? A statement about our commitment to ethical, community-focused architecture. Bisa's professional passion ignited. We could expand the sustainable elements, maybe add an educational component. A training program for young architects from underprivileged backgrounds, Huck added, catching her enthusiasm. They spent the next few hours reimagining the project, sketching ideas on whatever surfaces they could find. The storm outside gradually calmed, but they barely noticed, lost in their shared vision of the future. As dawn approached, they found themselves curled together on Bisa's couch, surrounded by drawings and notes. The first light of morning painted the sky in shades of hope. "We should get some rest before the board meeting," Bisa said, stifling a yawn. "Probably," Huck agreed, pulling her closer. "Are you nervous? About the meeting? A little? About us?" She smiled up at him. "Not anymore." He kissed her forehead softly. "Whatever happens in that boardroom, remember this moment. Remember that we're stronger together than apart." The city was waking up around them, the early morning light reflecting off rain-washed windows. Their path forward wouldn't be easy. There would still be prejudices to overcome, doubts to silence, battles to fight. But they would face them together, their love stronger for having been tested. As they prepared for the day ahead, Bisa paused to watch Huck gathering their scattered drawings. He looked up, catching her gaze, and smiled, that same smile that had first captured her heart. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that they would weather whatever storms lay ahead. Their love story wasn't just about romance. It was about courage, about standing up for what you believe in, about building something beautiful in a world that sometimes seems determined to tear things down. Like the buildings they designed together, their relationship would stand the test of time, stronger for having weathered the storm. The sun rose over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, a new day dawning for both their love and their shared vision. They were architects, not just of buildings, but of their own destiny, and together they would design something extraordinary. Chapter 6. The Fall. The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and bright, the previous night's storm leaving the city washed clean. Bisa stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her silk blouse, a deep royal blue that made her skin glow. The fabric was adorned with subtle patterns reminiscent of traditional Nigerian designs, a reminder of who she was and where she came from. Huck arrived at her door precisely at 7, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that made his eyes look like storm clouds. His breath caught when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said softly, drawing her into a gentle kiss. "Ready for this?" "As I'll ever be." Bisa squared her shoulders. "Whatever happens today, we face it together." The ride to Langston Enterprises was filled with quiet determination. In the back of the town car, Huck held Bisa's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. They had spent the early hours of morning preparing their strategy, but both knew that today would change everything, one way or another. The lobby was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Heads turned as they walked in together, Huck's hand resting protectively at the small of Bisa's back. There was no more pretense, no more hiding. The whispers followed them to the elevator, but neither paid them any attention. "Remember," Huck murmured as they ascended, "you have nothing to prove to them. Your work speaks for itself." The boardroom was imposing, all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The board members were already assembled, their faces a mix of curiosity and judgment. At the far end of the table sat Victoria Thorne, her presence a surprise that made Bisa's heart skip. "She shouldn't be here." Huck's voice was low with anger. "Let her stay," Bisa touched his arm gently. Let everyone see the truth. Huck took his place at the head of the table, but instead of directing Bisa to a presenter's position, he held out the chair to his immediate right. The gesture was clear. She was his equal, his partner, not someone to be judged from across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Huck began, his voice carrying authority that commanded attention. "I've called this emergency meeting to address several serious issues concerning recent events and the future direction of Langston Enterprises." He outlined the situation methodically. Victoria's manipulation of evidence, the false accusations, and most importantly, his own failure to stand firmly against the injustice. "But my greatest failure," he continued, his voice softening as he looked at Bisa, "was in not being honest about something from the start. I'm in love with Bisa Al-Hari, not as a CEO admiring a talented architect, but as a man who has found his perfect match in every way." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Victoria's face twisted in barely concealed rage. "This is precisely what I was concerned about," she interjected smoothly. "The integrity of our company." "The integrity of our company," Huck cut her off, "was only questioned when you fabricated evidence to discredit a talented architect whose only crime was excellence while being different from your expectations." He gestured to a junior IT member who had been waiting quietly. The young man connected his laptop to the room's display system, and suddenly the screens were filled with evidence. Emails showing Victoria's manipulation of dates, her access to competitor databases, her systematic campaign to undermine Bisa's position. "This is absurd." Victoria stood, her composure cracking. "You're willing to destroy everything your father built for love?" Bisa spoke for the first time, her voice clear and strong. "No, Miss Thorne. Huck isn't destroying anything. He's building something better, a company that values integrity, innovation, and inclusion. The question is whether the board is ready to be part of that future." She stood, moving to the presentation screen. With practiced grace, she pulled up the designs for the community center project, now expanded and enhanced from their late-night planning session. "This is what Langston Enterprises could be," she continued, passion filling her voice. "Not just another corporate giant focused solely on profit, but a leader in sustainable, community-focused development. A company that builds not just structures, but legacies." The board members leaned forward, caught by the vision she presented. Even the most conservative among them couldn't deny the innovation and potential in the designs. "The choice is yours," Huck addressed the board. "You can cling to old prejudices and limited visions, or you can be part of something revolutionary. But understand this. My relationship with Bisa isn't up for debate. If you want my continued leadership of this company, you accept both of us, together as we are." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria was the first to break it, pushing back her chair with a screech. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "You're all going to sit here and let them make a mockery of everything we stand for? A CEO throwing away his reputation for some girl from—" "That's enough!" The voice came from the far end of the table. Howard Jameson, the oldest board member and Huck's father's closest friend, stood slowly. "I've heard enough hate disguised as concern for propriety. When Thomas Langston founded this company, he had a vision of building not just buildings, but better futures. I see that same vision in his son's eyes now, and in the remarkable woman he loves." He turned to Victoria, his expression stern. "Ms. Thorne, you're fired. And if you ever try to practice your particular brand of discrimination in this industry again, I'll personally ensure every firm from here to Shanghai knows exactly what you did here." Victoria stormed out, but no one paid her any attention. All eyes were on Howard as he moved to stand before Huck and Bisa. "Young lady," he said softly, "those designs of yours, they remind me of Thomas in his early days, before success made him cautious. And you," he turned to Huck, You've finally become the leader your father always hoped you'd be, not by following his path, but by blazing your own. One by one, the board members voiced their support. Some were enthusiastic, others more reserved, but all recognized that change was necessary for growth. As the meeting concluded, Huck and Bisa stood together at the windows, watching their city spread out before them. The morning sun caught the glass of surrounding buildings, making them sparkle like their dreams made manifest. "We did it," Bisa whispered, still hardly believing. "We did it together." Huck pulled her close, not caring that the board members were still filing out. "The way we'll do everything from now on?" That afternoon they called a company-wide meeting. Standing hand in hand before their employees, they shared their vision for the future, a future built on innovation, inclusion, and love. The applause that followed was thunderous, led by the young IT technician who had helped expose the truth. Later, as evening painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, they returned to Bisa's apartment. The half-packed boxes still sat where they'd been abandoned the night before. "I suppose I should unpack," Bisa mused, looking around. "Or," Huck pulled her into his arms, "you could pack the rest and move in with me, make a fresh start in every way." Bisa's heart soared at the possibility. "Are you sure? After everything today?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her softly. "You are my home, Bisa Al-Heri. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be." They spent the evening planning their future, not just their living arrangements, but their dreams for the company, for their shared vision of architecture that could change lives. Each kiss was a celebration, each touch a promise of all that was to come. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a reminder of the storm they'd weathered together. But this time, they weren't afraid. They had built something stronger than any storm, a love founded on trust, respect, and shared dreams. As night fell, they stood on Bisa's balcony, wrapped in each other's arms. "What are you thinking?" Huck asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about what my mother always says, that every ending is just a new beginning in disguise." She turned in his arms to face him. Today felt like both an ending and a beginning. "The end of hiding, of doubt, of letting others define us," he agreed, "and the beginning of everything we'll build together." Their kiss was soft, tender, full of promise for the future they would create. Above them, stars peeked through passing clouds, witnessing their love story, a story of two architects who had designed not just buildings, but a future built on the strongest foundation of all, love that could weather any storm. Chapter 7. Redemption's Path. The weeks following the board meeting brought a new rhythm to Langston Enterprises. The tension that had filled the corridors dissipated, replaced by an energy of innovation and possibility. Huck and Bisa's relationship was no longer the subject of whispered speculation, but stood as a symbol of the company's commitment to breaking down old barriers. Yet despite their public victory, Huck could sense that something still lingered between them, a shadow of hurt that needed more than just professional vindication to heal. He discovered this one evening as they worked late in his office, reviewing plans for the community center project. "What about adding a cultural education space here?" Bisa suggested, pointing to a section of the blueprints. She was leaning over his desk, close enough that her perfume, a subtle blend of jasmine and vanilla, teased his senses. "Perfect," he agreed, but his attention was on her face, noticing how she still sometimes hesitated before sharing her ideas, as if a part of her was still waiting for rejection. That night, after walking her to her car, Huck stood in the parking garage long after her taillights had disappeared. He needed to do more than just move forward. He needed to rebuild the complete trust they'd once shared. The next morning, Huck arrived at the office earlier than usual, a plan forming in his mind. He spent hours making calls, arranging meetings, setting things in motion. When Bisa arrived, He was waiting by her desk with 2 cups of coffee and an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, accepting both the coffee and the envelope with curiosity. "The beginning of a journey." He smiled mysteriously. "Open it." Inside was an airline ticket to Nigeria, dated for the following week. Bisa's eyes widened as she read the details. "Huck, what?" "I want to meet your mother," he said softly. "I want to understand where you come from, see the place that shaped you, if you'll let me." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked up at him. "You'd do that? I'd do anything to show you how serious I am about our future. Besides," he added with a gentle smile, "I need to properly ask for her blessing." The journey to Nigeria was transformative. Huck watched in wonder as Bisa came alive in her homeland, her natural grace enhanced by the joy of returning to her roots. Her mother, Amara Alheri, lived in a modest but beautiful home filled with the textiles she still wove by hand. "Welcome, my son," she greeted Huck in heavily accented English, pulling him into a warm embrace. Her eyes, so like Bisa's, seemed to look straight into his soul. Over the next few days, Huck immersed himself in Bisa's world. He learned to eat traditional dishes with his right hand, listened to stories of Bisa's childhood, and spent hours watching Amara work at her loom, her fingers dancing through complex patterns that told stories of their own. "You see these threads?" Amara said one afternoon, gesturing to her current project. "Each one weak alone, but together they make something strong, beautiful, like love, yes? Must weave together trust, respect, understanding." Huck nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. "I broke some of those threads," he admitted. "I'm trying to weave them back together." Amara's smile was knowing. Broken threads can make patterns stronger, if mended with care and patience. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, Huck found Bisa sitting in her mother's garden. She was sketching, her face peaceful in the fading light. "What are you working on?" he asked, settling beside her. She showed him the drawing. It was a design that incorporated traditional weaving patterns into modern architectural elements. "Being here, it reminds me of why I fell in love with architecture, the way it can bridge past and present, tradition and innovation." "Like us," Huck said softly, taking her hand. "Yes," she agreed, squeezing his fingers. "Like us." The next day, Huck asked Amara for a private moment. In halting phrases he'd practiced in secret, he addressed her in Hausa, expressing his love for Bisa and his desire to make her his wife. Amara's eyes filled with tears of joy. "You learn our language?" "I've been studying," he admitted. "I want to share every part of Bisa's life, understand every piece of who she is." That evening, Amara presented Huck with a specially woven textile. "For wedding," she explained. "Pattern tells story of 2 rivers joining to make mighty ocean. When they returned to New York, something had shifted between them. The shadow of hurt had lifted, replaced by a deeper understanding. Huck had shown not just remorse for his past doubts, but a commitment to truly knowing and honoring all aspects of Bisa's identity. Their work on the Community Center project took on new dimension, incorporating elements inspired by their time in Nigeria. The design evolved to include spaces for cultural education, areas where traditional crafts could be taught and celebrated. One evening, as they stood on the construction site watching the sun set behind the partially completed structure, Huck turned to Bisa. "Do you remember what your mother said about broken threads making a pattern stronger?" Bisa nodded, leaning into his side. "I think I finally understand what she meant," he continued. "Our love isn't weaker for having been tested. If anything, it's stronger because we chose to rebuild it, to weave something even more beautiful from the broken pieces." He pulled away slightly, reaching into his pocket. "Which is why I want to ask you something. Bisa's breath caught as he knelt before her, holding out a ring that combined modern elegance with traditional African design elements. "Bisa al-Heri," his voice was thick with emotion, "you've taught me what it means to build something truly meaningful, not just in architecture but in life. You've shown me that the strongest foundations are built on trust, understanding, and unconditional love. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Bisa's face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, catching the last rays of sunlight. Behind them, their building rose against the darkening sky, a testament to their professional collaboration. But in that moment, they were focused only on each other, on the future they would build together. Later that night, in Huck's penthouse, they celebrated their engagement with champagne and dreams. Bisa curled into his side on the balcony, her ring sparkling in the city lights. "I was thinking," she said softly, "about incorporating some traditional Nigerian wedding elements into our ceremony. Would you be open to that?" "I'd love it." Huck kissed her temple. "I want our wedding to be like everything else we create together, a perfect blend of both our worlds." They spent hours planning, their professional training showing in the detailed sketches they made of ceremony layouts and reception designs. Every element would tell their story, the story of two architects who had built something more beautiful than either could have designed alone. As midnight approached, they stood together looking out over their city. The buildings they had designed together stood proud against the night sky, but their greatest collaboration was the love they had rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful for having weathered the storm. "I love you," Bisa murmured, safely enclosed in Huck's arms. "And I love you," he replied, his voice full of promise. "Every day, every moment, I'll show you just how much." Above them, stars twinkled like blessing from both their ancestors, witnessing this new chapter in their love story. They had found their way back to each other, and in doing so had created something rare and precious, a love built on understanding, strengthened by adversity, and designed to last a lifetime. Chapter 8. Rebuilding. The autumn air carried the scent of new beginnings as Bisa and Huck threw themselves into both their professional projects and wedding preparations. The community centre was rising steadily from its foundations, each beam and wall a testament to their shared vision. Similarly, their wedding plans began to take shape, blending their cultures into something uniquely their own. One crisp morning, Bisa arrived at the construction site to find it transformed. Fairy lights had been strung across the skeletal structure, and in the center of what would become the main gathering space, a table was set for two. "What's all this?" she asked as Huck emerged from behind a column, looking devastatingly handsome in a casual sweater and slacks. "I thought we could have breakfast where our dreams are literally taking shape," he smiled, pulling out a chair for her. "Plus, I have something to show you." Over coffee and pastries, Huck presented her with a thick folder. Inside were applications, dozens of them, from young architects and designers from underserved communities around the world. "Remember when we talked about creating an educational program?" His eyes sparkled with excitement. "Well, I've been working on setting up a foundation, the Al-Heri Langston Fellowship for Innovative Architecture." Bisa's hands trembled as she read through the applications. Each one represented a dream, a potential future that might have gone unrealized without this opportunity. "Huck, this is incredible." She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. "But why use my name? The company is changing," he finished for her. "Just like we are. Besides," he reached across the table to take her hand, "soon enough it will be your name too." They spent the morning reviewing applications together, their professional expertise blending seamlessly with their personal connection. Each candidate they selected would receive not just financial support, but mentorship and practical experience working on projects like the community center. Later that week, they hosted a dinner party at their penthouse, their first official event as an engaged couple. The guest list included board members, fellowship candidates, and community leaders who would be served by their projects. "You look stunning," Huck whispered as Bisa emerged from their bedroom, wearing a modern gown that incorporated traditional Nigerian fabric. The deep blue and gold patterns seemed to shimmer as she moved. "And you," she straightened his tie with practiced fingers, "look very handsome in your matching pocket square." The evening was a celebration of everything they stood for: innovation, inclusion, and the power of love to bridge any divide. Howard Jameson, who had stood up for them in the boardroom, raised a toast that brought tears to many eyes. "To Huck and Bisa," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "who remind us that the greatest architecture isn't just about buildings. It's about building connections, communities, and futures." As their guests mingled, Bisa and Huck found quiet moments to connect with each one. They discussed sustainable building practices with environmental activists, educational opportunities with aspiring architects, and community needs with local leaders. "You two are really changing things," one of the fellowship candidates, a young woman from the Bronx, told them earnestly. "When I was growing up, I never thought someone like me could have a place in this industry. That's exactly why we're doing this." Bisa squeezed her hand. "Talent and passion shouldn't be limited by circumstance." After the guests had gone, Huck and Bisa stood on their balcony, the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible." She turned in his arms to face him. "When I first came to New York, I thought success would mean seeing my designs become reality. I never imagined finding someone who would help me build something even more meaningful." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. During the day, they oversaw construction progress and interviewed fellowship candidates. Evenings were filled with wedding preparations, each detail carefully chosen to honor both their heritages. Amara flew in from Nigeria to help with traditional aspects of the ceremony. She brought with her lengths of hand-woven fabric that would be incorporated into both their wedding attire and the ceremony decoration. "See these patterns," she explained to Huck one evening, running her fingers over the intricate designs. "They tell story of journey, of two paths becoming one, like you and my Bisa." The community center project progressed rapidly, its innovative design drawing attention from architectural magazines and social justice organizations alike. Bisa and Huck were interviewed together, their personal and professional partnership held up as an example of how diversity and inclusion could drive innovation. One particularly meaningful day came when they hosted a site visit for the first group of fellowship recipients. The young architects' eyes were wide as they took in the sustainable systems and community-focused spaces. "The most important thing to remember," Bisa told them as they toured the site, "is that architecture isn't just about creating beautiful buildings. It's about understanding the people who will use them, the lives that will be lived within these walls. And sometimes," Huck added, sharing a loving look with his fiancée, "it's about having the courage to build something new, even when others don't see your vision." That evening, as they reviewed wedding venue options, Bisa suddenly sat up straight. "What if?" she began, excitement building in her voice. "What if what?" Huck prompted, loving the way her eyes lit up when inspiration struck. "What if we held the wedding here, in the community center? Once it's completed, of course, it would be perfect. The blend of modern and traditional architecture, the community spaces, the garden courtyards. And it would be a beautiful symbol." Huck caught her enthusiasm. Our personal and professional lives coming together in a space we created. They stayed up late into the night, sketching layouts and discussing logistics. The main hall would be perfect for the ceremony, its soaring windows letting in natural light. The courtyard gardens would provide an ideal setting for the reception, where traditional Nigerian celebrations could blend with modern wedding festivities. As the weeks passed, both the community center and their wedding plans took shape. The building rose steadily, each new addition bringing them closer to their vision. Similarly, their relationship deepened, strengthened by their shared purpose and the joy of creating something meaningful together. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, they stood together on the partially completed rooftop garden of the community center. Construction materials were still scattered about, but the bones of their design were clear. The flowing spaces, the sustainable features, the careful balance of function and beauty. "It's really happening," Bisa breathed, leaning back against Huck's chest as they looked out over their city. "All of it." "Did you ever doubt it would?" he asked, his arms tightening around her. "Once," she admitted quietly, "during those dark days, when everything seemed to be falling apart, but now—" She turned to face him, reaching up to trace his jawline with gentle fingers. "Now I believe in the power of rebuilding, of making something stronger from what was broken." Huck caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Like us." "Like us," she agreed, stretching up to kiss him properly. The kiss deepened, filled with all the love and passion that had brought them to this point. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, the city lights had begun to twinkle below them like a reflection of the stars appearing above. 2 months, Huck murmured, resting his forehead against hers. 2 months until this space is completed and we make it ours in every way. 2 months until we start our greatest project yet, Bisa smiled, building a life together. They stayed on the rooftop until the stars fully emerged, planning and dreaming together. Their love story, like the building rising around them, was a testament to the power of vision, perseverance, and the courage to build something extraordinary. As they finally prepared to leave, Huck pulled Bisa close for one more kiss. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Every day, I love you more." "And I love you," she replied softly. "My partner in everything." The night wrapped around them like a blessing as they made their way home, their hearts full of dreams for the future they would build together. They had weathered the storm, rebuilt their foundation, and now stood ready to create something beautiful. A love story written in steel and stone, in tradition and innovation, in trust and understanding. Chapter 9. Love's Blueprint. The rooftop garden of the community center was transformed under the golden light of sunset. What had once been a construction site was now a flourishing oasis, with native plants and sustainable water features creating a peaceful retreat above the city streets. This evening, Huck had arranged for it to be theirs alone. Bisa emerged from the elevator to find the space lit by hundreds of twinkling lights. Rose petals created a path through the garden, leading to where Huck stood beside a table set for 2. He was wearing the traditional Nigerian attire Amara had helped him select, the rich fabrics making him look both regal and touchingly sincere in his embrace of her culture. "What's all this?" Bisa asked, taking in the romantic scene. 1 week, he smiled, drawing her into his arms. 1 week until this space hosts our wedding. I wanted us to have one perfect evening here, just the 2 of us, before we share it with everyone else. The table was set with a feast of both Nigerian and American dishes, a culinary representation of their blended lives. Huck had worked with Mama Ada from the Brooklyn restaurant to ensure every traditional dish was perfectly prepared. "You've thought of everything," Bisa said softly, touched by his attention to detail. "I've been taking notes," he admitted, pulling out her chair. "Every time you mention something from home, every story your mother tells about traditions, I want our wedding to honor all of it." Over dinner, they talked about the final preparations for both the wedding and the community center's grand opening, which would follow a week after their ceremony. The fellowship program was already making waves in the architectural community, with applications pouring in from around the world. "I got a call from the Lagos Architecture Board today," Bisa mentioned, her eyes sparkling. "They want to partner with us to extend the fellowship program to Nigeria." "That's perfect." Huck reached for her hand across the table. "We could set up an exchange program, bring Nigerian architects here and send our fellows there. Create a true cultural bridge." After dinner, they walked through the garden, stopping at various points to admire how their design had come to life. The space perfectly balanced innovation with tradition, just as their relationship did. "Remember when we first designed this?" Bisa asked, running her hand along a sculptural wall that incorporated traditional African patterns into its modern form. "I remember being amazed by how you saw possibilities I never would have imagined." Huck pulled her close. "Just like you helped me see everything in life in new ways." They reached a secluded corner where a small fountain created a peaceful backdrop with its gentle music. Here Huck turned to face Bisa, taking both her hands in his. "I have something for you," he said softly, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a slim box made of polished wood inlaid with mother-of-pearl designs. Inside was a bracelet that took Bisa's breath away. Delicate goldwork incorporated both architectural elements and traditional Nigerian symbols, creating a piece that was uniquely them. "The patterns," Huck explained as he fastened it around her wrist, "tell our story. See here? These represent the skyscrapers where we met. These are traditional symbols for love and unity that your mother helped me choose. And these," he pointed to a series of intricate knots, "represent how our lives have become intertwined." Tears filled Bisa's eyes as she studied the beautiful piece. "It's perfect," she whispered, "like everything about us." "Not perfect," he corrected gently, drawing her into his arms. "Real, with all the challenges and growth and beauty that comes with building something true." They danced under the stars, moving to music that played softly through hidden speakers. The city lights created a glittering backdrop to their private celebration, while the garden they'd created offered an intimate sanctuary. "1 week," Bisa murmured against Huck's chest. "1 week until we make this space ours in the most personal way. And then a lifetime of building beautiful things together," he promised, kissing her softly. The following days were a whirlwind of final preparations. Amara arrived with the last of the traditional wedding garments, each piece carefully selected to honor both families' heritage. The community center hummed with activity as decorations were installed and final touches were added to both the building and the wedding setup. 2 days before the wedding, they hosted a special dinner for the first class of fellowship recipients. The young architects would be part of the wedding celebration, representing the future they were working to build. "Looking at all of you," Bisa addressed the group, standing hand in hand with Huck, "I see what's possible when we dare to dream beyond boundaries. Each of you brings unique perspectives and experiences that will help shape the future of architecture." "And watching Bisa and Mr. Langston," one of the fellows spoke up, "shows us that true partnership, in work and in life, can create something revolutionary." The evening before their wedding, after the rehearsal dinner, Huck and Bisa returned to the rooftop garden for a quiet moment, alone. The space was ready for tomorrow's celebration, with traditional Nigerian decorations blending seamlessly with modern elements. "Having second thoughts?" Huck teased gently, noticing Bisa's thoughtful expression. "Never." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with love. "I was just thinking about my father. He would have loved this. Not just the wedding, but everything we're building together. He always said that true success isn't measured in money or power, but in the lives you touch." "He'd be so proud of you." Huck pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Just as I am, every day." They stood together in the garden they'd created, surrounded by the physical manifestation of their shared vision. Tomorrow, this space would be filled with loved ones celebrating their union, but tonight it was their private sanctuary. "I should go," Bisa said reluctantly as the hour grew late. Tradition dictated they spend their last night apart. "One more dance?" Huck requested, pulling her back into his arms as soft music began to play. They swayed together under the stars, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. Every step, every turn was a reminder of their journey, from that first meeting in his office to this moment on the eve of their wedding. "I love you," Bisa whispered, looking up into his eyes. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you." Huck's voice was rough with emotion. "Every day, every moment, more and more." Their kiss was tender, full of promise for tomorrow and all the days to follow. When they finally parted, both knew that while they might be spending the night apart, their hearts would remain forever connected. As Bisa left the garden, she paused for one last look at the space that would host their wedding. The moonlight cast a magical glow over everything, making the architectural details they'd so carefully planned seem to come alive with possibility. Tomorrow, they would begin their greatest project yet, building a life together. Like every building they designed, it would be a perfect blend of innovation and tradition, strength and beauty, dreams and reality. The night wrapped around her like a blessing as she made her way home, her heart full of love and anticipation. Above, the stars twinkled like promises, while the city lights below sparkled like dreams made manifest. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Chapter 10. Unity in Design. Dawn broke over Manhattan in a symphony of gold and rose, as if nature itself was celebrating the union about to take place. In her private dressing room at the community center, Bisa sat before a mirror as her mother helped her prepare for the ceremony. The space had been transformed into a sanctuary of calm, filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the soft sounds of traditional Nigerian music. "You look like an angel," Amara whispered, carefully arranging the intricate headpiece that combined modern elegance with traditional Nigerian design. Bisa's wedding dress was a masterpiece of cultural fusion, a modern silhouette in pure white, overlaid with panels of hand-woven Nigerian fabric in deep blue and gold. The patterns told stories of love, unity and blessing, each thread carefully chosen by Amara herself. Something old, Amara fastened a necklace around her daughter's neck, a family heirloom that had been worn by generations of women in their family, for the strength of our ancestors. Something new. She adjusted the bracelet Huck had given her, its architectural patterns gleaming. "For the future you build together." Something borrowed. She draped a length of her own wedding veil over Bisa's shoulders, for the wisdom passed down. And something blue. Bisa touched the traditional fabric of her dress, smiling at their modern take on the old tradition. In another part of the building, Huck was preparing with equal care. He wore a beautifully tailored suit that incorporated elements of traditional Nigerian menswear, including a cap and sash made from fabric matching Bisa's dress. Howard Jameson stood with him, acting as both best man and father figure. "Your father would be proud," Howard said softly, adjusting Huck's tie, "not just of this day, but of the man you've become." The community center they'd built together had been transformed into a wedding venue that perfectly reflected their journey. The main hall, with its soaring windows and elegant architecture, merged modern design with traditional elements. Nigerian fabrics draped the walls in waves of color, while architectural elements they designed together created a natural altar space. As guests arrived, they were greeted by a blend of cultures that set the tone for the celebration. Traditional Nigerian greeters welcomed each person with small gifts of blessed palm wine, while modern jazz softly played. The fellowship students they'd mentored served as ushers, proud to be part of this momentous day. Before the ceremony began, Bisa and Huck met privately in the rooftop garden for their first look. When Huck turned to see his bride, his breath caught in his throat. She was radiant, her beauty enhanced by the joy shining in her eyes. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered, taking her hands in his. "Even more beautiful than our buildings," she teased, her eyes sparkling with happy tears. "Infinitely more." He pulled her close for a gentle kiss, careful not to disturb her makeup. "You are my masterpiece." The ceremony itself was a carefully choreographed blend of traditions. It began with a Nigerian prayer of blessing, performed by an elder from Bisa's village who had flown in specifically for the occasion. The wedding party entered to the sound of traditional drums, mixed with classical music, creating a unique harmony that represented their united lives. When Bisa appeared at the entrance with her mother, Huck felt tears spring to his eyes. She moved down the aisle, like a dream made real, each step bringing them closer to their shared future. The light streaming through the windows they'd designed together created a natural spotlight, making her glow like an angel. Their vows were deeply personal, spoken first in English and then in Hausa, Huck's careful pronunciation of the traditional words bringing tears to Amara's eyes. "Bisa," Huck's voice carried clearly through the hushed room. "You came into my life like a revelation, showing me possibilities I never imagined. You challenged me to be better, to see beyond the obvious, to build something meaningful. I promise to love you with the same creativity and dedication you bring to everything you do. To support your dreams, share your burdens, and celebrate your joy. Together, we will design a life more beautiful than either of us could create alone." Bisa's voice trembled with emotion as she responded, "Huck, you broke down every wall I built around my heart, showing me that true partnership means being stronger together than apart. I promise to love you with the same courage you showed in choosing love over convention. To stand beside you in all weather, to build our dreams together, and to fill our days with beauty and purpose. You are my home, my inspiration, and my greatest adventure." The exchange of rings included both modern bands and traditional Nigerian wedding beads, each carrying symbolic meaning. As they were pronounced husband and wife, the celebration erupted in a joyous blend of cultures, applause mixing with traditional ululations of celebration. The reception that followed was a feast for all senses. The rooftop garden hosted dinner under the stars, with tables arranged to encourage conversation and connection. The menu featured both Nigerian and American dishes, each carefully selected to represent their shared journey. Their first dance took place as the sun set, casting the city in shades of gold and purple. They moved together to a song that mixed traditional Nigerian rhythms with modern melody, their steps fluid and natural, like everything else they created together. "Happy?" Huck murmured against Bisa's ear as they swayed together. "Beyond words," she replied, lifting her face for a kiss. "This is better than any design we've ever created." The celebration continued late into the night, with moments of both elegant sophistication and joyous abandon. The fellowship students performed a surprise dance they'd learned from YouTube tutorials about Nigerian wedding traditions, making everyone laugh and cheer. As midnight approached, Huck and Bisa slipped away to their private sanctuary, the penthouse suite of Manhattan's most exclusive hotel. Rose petals created a path through the rooms, leading to a balcony with a breathtaking view of the city they'd helped shape. Mrs. Langston, Huck pulled Bisa into his arms, still amazed that this remarkable woman was now his wife. Mr. Langston, she replied with a radiant smile, reaching up to touch his face. Ready to begin our greatest design project yet? Building a life together. He smiled, drawing her closer. I've never been more ready for anything. Their kiss was tender and passionate, full of promise for all the days to come. The city lights twinkled below like earthbound stars, while real stars shone above, blessing their union. They had created something extraordinary, a love that bridged cultures, challenged conventions, and promised to build something beautiful with each passing day. Later, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Bisa traced patterns on Huck's chest. I was thinking, she said softly, about what my mother always says about weaving, how the strongest fabrics are made from different threads coming together. Like us, Huck caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Like us, she agreed, snuggling closer. Different backgrounds, different perspectives, but together we create something stronger and more beautiful than either of us could alone. The night wrapped around them like a blessing, full of promise for their future. They had built their love like they built their buildings, with careful planning, bold vision, and unwavering commitment to creating something extraordinary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new dreams to build. But tonight was for celebrating the masterpiece they had created together, a love story written in steel and stone, in tradition and innovation, in trust and understanding. Chapter 11. Building Forever. The morning after their wedding dawned bright and clear, finding Bisa and Huck wrapped in each other's arms in their luxurious hotel suite. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow over their first morning as husband and wife. Good morning, Mrs. Langston, Huck murmured, pressing a soft kiss to Bisa's temple as she stirred awake. Good morning, my husband, she replied with a radiant smile, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. Their honeymoon would be a global adventure, combining their love of architecture with their desire to understand different cultures. The itinerary they'd planned would take them from the ancient pyramids of Egypt to the modern wonders of Dubai, from the traditional temples of Japan to the innovative structures of Singapore. Their first stop was Paris, where they checked into a stunning suite at the Ritz with views of the Eiffel Tower. That evening, they dined at a private table in the hotel's famous restaurant, both still glowing with newlywed happiness. To us, Huck raised his champagne glass, and to all the adventures ahead. To building forever, Bisa clinked her glass against his, one day at a time. The next morning they set out to explore the city through an architect's eyes. They visited classic monuments and modern marvels, each stop inspiring conversations about how different cultures approached the art of building. At the Louvre, they spent hours discussing how I.M. Pei's modern pyramid complemented the classical architecture surrounding it. It's like us, Bisa observed, something new and different, enhancing something traditional and established. Their days fell into a delightful rhythm of exploration and intimacy. They would spend mornings visiting architectural sites, afternoons sketching in cafes, and evenings enjoying romantic dinners in hidden restaurants they discovered on their wanderings. In Egypt, they rode camels at dawn to view the pyramids, both awestruck by the engineering genius of the ancient builders. Huck watched in admiration as Bisa spoke with local architects about preservation techniques, her passion for learning evident in every question she asked. "You're amazing," he told her later, as they watched the sunset paint the desert gold. "The way you connect with people, the way you see possibilities in everything." Dubai provided a stunning contrast with its ultra-modern architecture. They stayed in the Burj Al Arab, marveling at how the building pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. During a private dinner in their suite, they discussed incorporating some of the innovative sustainability features they'd observed into their own future projects. Imagine, Bisa sketched rapidly on a napkin, if we could adapt these cooling systems for community housing in hot climates. It could revolutionize living conditions for millions. That's what I love about you. Huck pulled her close, kissing her temple. You never see architecture as just buildings. You see it as a way to improve lives. In Japan, they immersed themselves in the perfect harmony of traditional architecture. They stayed in a luxury ryokan, learning about how Japanese design principles balanced beauty with functionality. The peaceful aesthetics inspired them both to think differently about space and purpose. One evening, as they sat in their private garden watching koi swim in a small pond, Huck noticed Bisa sketching intently in her travel journal. "What are you working on?" he asked, moving to sit beside her. "Ideas for our home," she showed him the drawings. "I want to incorporate elements from everywhere we've visited, the light from Paris, the grandeur of Dubai, the harmony of Japan, create something that tells our story." "Perfect," he kissed her softly. "Just like you." Singapore marked the final stop of their honeymoon. Its blend of ultra-modern architecture and preserved heritage buildings, providing inspiration for their own vision of blending cultures and styles. During a private dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, Bisa noticed Huck seemed distracted. "What's on your mind, love?" He reached across the table to take her hand. "I was thinking about our future. Not just the buildings we'll design, but everything else. Having a family, building a home, creating a legacy that's more than just architecture." Bisa's heart swelled with love. "I've been thinking about that too, about how our children will grow up understanding both their cultures, about the kind of world we want to build for them. Our children." Huck's voice was soft with wonder. "Half you, half me. Completely perfect." They spent their last honeymoon evening on their hotel balcony, planning their future together. They talked about the house they would build, combining their architectural expertise with their personal dreams. They discussed expanding the fellowship program internationally, creating opportunities for young architects around the world. "We should include a family wing in the house design," Huck suggested, his hand resting protectively over Bisa's stomach. "For the future." "With a huge garden," Bisa added, snuggling closer to him, "where our children can play and grow, surrounded by beauty." Their return to New York felt like the beginning of a new chapter. The penthouse they currently shared would be their home while they worked on designing and building their dream house, a project that would combine everything they'd learned on their honeymoon with their own unique vision. The company had flourished in their absence, with the fellowship program gaining international recognition. Their first class of fellows had already begun making waves in the architectural community with their innovative designs and community-focused projects. One evening, about a week after their return, Bisa was reviewing applications for the next fellowship class when Huck came home with a surprise. He led her to their building's rooftop garden, where he'd arranged a romantic dinner reminiscent of their early dating days. "What's the occasion?" she asked as he pulled out her chair. "Do I need an occasion to spoil my wife?" He smiled, pouring champagne. Then his expression grew more serious. "Actually, I wanted to show you something." He pulled out a large envelope containing preliminary sketches for their dream home. The designs incorporated elements from every place they'd visited on their honeymoon, blended with their own innovative ideas. "I've been working on these whenever you were sleeping on the plane," he explained. "It's just a starting point, but I wanted to show you that I'm ready to build our forever home, ready to start our family, ready for everything." Tears filled Bisa's eyes as she studied the drawings. "They're perfect," she whispered. "Just like you, just like us." Their kiss was tender and passionate, full of love and promise for the future. Above them, stars twinkled like blessing from both their ancestors, witnessing this new chapter in their love story. Later that night, as they lay in bed discussing their plans, Bisa traced the architectural patterns on her wedding bracelet. "You know what I love most about being married to you." "What's that?" "That every day feels like we're designing something new together. Not just buildings, but our life, our future, our love story." Huck pulled her closer, kissing her softly. "And we're just getting started. The best designs take time to perfect." The city lights sparkled beyond their windows like a constellation of earthbound stars, while the real stars shone above. They had built something extraordinary, a love that transcended cultural boundaries, that grew stronger with every challenge, that promised to create something beautiful with each passing day. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, both knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest design project yet, building forever, together. Chapter 12. Legacy of Love. 2 weeks after returning from their architectural world tour honeymoon, while Bisa and Huck were fully immersed in their new community center project, Bisa and Huck's love story took an unexpected and beautiful turn. What started as a routine doctor's visit turned into a moment that would change their lives forever. "Mr. and Mrs. Langston," the doctor smiled warmly, turning the ultrasound screen toward them, "I'd like you to meet your babies, all 3 of them." Bisa's grip on Huck's hand tightened as they stared at the screen in wonder. 3 tiny heartbeats flickered like stars, each one perfect, each one a miracle. "Triplets!" Huck's voice was filled with awe as he kissed Bisa's temple. 3 babies. 3 blessings," Bisa whispered, happy tears streaming down her face. "Our love multiplied by 3. The months that followed were filled with joyful preparation. They threw themselves into designing the perfect nursery with the same passion they brought to their architectural projects. The room they created was a masterpiece of love. 3 elegant cribs arranged like a perfect triangle, the walls painted with a mural that blended Manhattan's skyline with Nigerian landscapes. Their families were overjoyed. Amara flew in from Nigeria immediately upon hearing the news, bringing with her traditional fertility beads and blessings. She spent hours weaving special blankets for each baby, incorporating symbols of love, strength, and destiny into the patterns. 3 babies is a powerful blessing in our culture, she told them, her eyes shining. It means the ancestors are celebrating your love with extra joy. The day the triplets arrived was like a symphony reaching its crescendo. Bisa was radiant despite her exhaustion, and Huck never left her side. When their 3 perfect miracles entered the world within minutes of each other, the room was filled with an atmosphere of pure magic. "Hello, my precious ones," Bisa whispered as each baby was placed in turn against her heart. 2 girls and a boy, each perfect, each unique. They named them with careful thought. Amara, after Bisa's mother, her eyes already showing her grandmother's wisdom. Thomas, after Huck's father, with a strong grip that spoke of determination. And Aisha, their surprise blessing, whose first cries sounded like music. "They're perfect," Huck's voice was thick with emotion as he cradled Aisha, while Bisa held Amara and Thomas, like their mother. The babies thrived, growing stronger each day. Each had inherited different aspects of their parents. Amara showed early signs of Bisa's creativity. Thomas had Huck's thoughtful gaze, and Aisha seemed to embody both their spirits equally. Their home was soon filled with the beautiful chaos of triple blessings. The nursery they designed proved perfect for late-night feedings and early morning cuddles. They took turns walking the babies at night, sharing quiet moments as a family as the city slept around them. "Look what our love created," Bisa said one dawn, as they stood together by the nursery windows, all 3 babies finally sleeping peacefully. 3 perfect designs. "The most beautiful project we'll ever complete," Huck agreed, pulling her close. "Though I think you did most of the work on this one." The days flowed into weeks, marked by first smiles, synchronized cries, and moments of pure joy. They established their own rhythm, learning to balance their work with the demands of 3 babies. The community center they'd built included a state-of-the-art daycare facility, allowing them to keep their children close while continuing their professional dreams. One evening, as the babies slept in their carefully arranged cribs, Huck found Bisa in their bedroom, looking at the architectural sketches they'd drawn together on their honeymoon. "Having second thoughts about juggling it all?" he asked softly. "No," she turned to him with a radiant smile. "Just thinking about how perfectly everything has come together. Our love, our work, our babies. It's like the most beautiful design we never planned." He pulled her into his arms, swaying gently as if dancing to music only they could hear. "We've been blessed 3 times over," he murmured against her hair. 3 perfect expressions of our love. "And this is just the beginning." She lifted her face for a kiss. "Think of all we'll build together, all the love we'll share, all the memories we'll create." Their kiss was tender and passionate, full of gratitude for their blessings and excitement for their future. Above them, stars twinkled like the eyes of ancestors smiling down on their joy, while the city lights sparkled below like earthbound starlight. In the nursery, their 3 miracles slept peacefully, each breath a testimony to the power of love to create something extraordinary. They were more than just babies. They were the living embodiment of 2 cultures united, of love transcending boundaries, of dreams taking the most beautiful form imaginable. As Huck and Bisa stood in the doorway of the nursery one last time before retiring for the night, their hearts were full to bursting. Their love had not only built buildings and broken barriers, it had created 3 perfect souls, 3 new lights in the world, 3 blessed promises for the future. "I love you," Bisa whispered, leaning back against Huck's chest. "More than ever, more each day." "And I love you," he replied softly, his arms tightening around her. "My perfect partner, my inspiration, the mother of our miracles." The night wrapped around them like a tender embrace, full of promises kept and dreams yet to come. They had built something extraordinary, not just in steel and stone, but in flesh and blood and boundless love. Their story would live on in their children, in their work, in every life they touched. Together, they had designed something more beautiful than either could have imagined alone, a legacy of love that would continue growing, thriving, and blessing the world 3 times over. The end. Subscribe if you liked.